It's the developer's version of Sherlock Holmes. It's easy to throw out everything and then restart again. The trickier or the harder challenge the good developers would do is like, here is the bottleneck which I'm gonna remove, but the rest of the parts still can stay same. So the devs taking end-to-end ownership is probably one of the core things.
Like, what was the point when you had to think about inserting a manager between you and the developers, maybe elevating somebody from the development team?
And we specifically asked them, did you do at least customer support to your friends and family? Like, did anyone report a bug? Based on that, you fix something. You could, do that in a college project. And then they see, me, chatting with others about movies and anime and whatnot during lunch, or playing ping pong. And like, they get to a point where, okay, I think he's human. I can go and talk to him, and nothing bad will happen.
Welcome, Hari, to the next edition of Pakka Nimbu Podcast. Happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me here. Super excited about the conversation ahead.
Hari probably needs no introduction. Hari is the CTO of Hackerrank. And if you haven't heard of Hackerrank and you're still listening to the podcast, leave a comment below. To kick it off, how did you start your career and how did the Hackerrank idea came about?
So this is it's one of those fun college projects which actually evolved into a company. We never thought we'd build a company out of this. So there were two incidents which made us build this, right? So the first one was before Hackerrank. Not sure how many of you have had to go through this. Is if whenever companies come for campus placements, they used to get the question papers printed, and one of the pages would be like, okay, here is a 2D array, find the max sum, min sum, and write the code here. So that's the coding question pattern there. And they also would come up with a bunch of multiple choice questions, but that is also a printed booklet with an OCR kind of a paper where you have to mark the whichever is the multiple choice is the correct answer. So and companies do want to finish this process much soon, because they do, the software engineers who are in the campus, they want to finish the process, go back to the company and start doing their usual work. So in my year, in one of the companies, I had to give the test at around like 4 p.m. at the end of the college. And then what happened was the software engineers were correcting the question answers we all write. That's so wrong. It's in so many levels. And by the time, and because they wanted to finish the whole process on the same day, by the time my interview process came, it was around like 11:30 p.m. or something. And I was just sitting in my room, and the middle of the night, the training and placement office, I get a call from there saying you have an interview. Obviously, I bombed the interview. I was totally unprepared. On the other side, Vivek was part of the training and placement group, my other co-founder and CEO. So he was the one who was correcting the multiple choice questions there. So he was helping the company correct these multiple choice questions there. And both of us have seen the same problem through different lenses. And in our college days, we also built a programming club in college. It's called Code Labs, and where you would come in and you would participate in a coding contest, and based on how well you perform in the coding contest, we would give some prize like a Google T-shirt or something of that sort. So when we built that, we felt like this should be the right solution for this. It's almost like it shouldn't be. It's an age of internet. You shouldn't be doing this process this way. And though we never thought we would fix it for anyone, like it's some company would really build this and launch it as a software, but again, when we joined our own respective companies, we saw that the process was the same. So at some point we decided, why don't we build it as a fun project? Like, we still didn't believe that it was a company. It was like, oh, can it be a fun project? Can we launch it as an open source stuff and so on? And as we started talking to more and more, hiring managers, recruiters, felt like there is something to try out here, and that's what started this whole journey. So it's at core going through the problem while doing campus hiring in college.
Awesome. So you wrote the first version while you were still a student. Maybe a bunch of your friends helped in writing the first version. Did you immediately start the company after you finished college, or did you go and work at some other company and took a job, and then the idea of setting this company came along at a later point?
We both worked for 1 year. So I was with IBM, and my other co-founder Vivek was with Amazon. So
Okay.
we thought we'd have to go understand the industry, and there was this was 2011,
Mm-hmm.
where startups weren't that cool, and starting a company needed a lot of approvals from your parents and relatives and everything else. So it
Yeah.
had a complications to it. So certainly we worked for about a year, and then exactly after a year we decided it's easier to try this when you're young, when you have very less responsibilities like family and other things. So after a year we started this.
Got it. Got it. Okay. But you knew the idea already that, yeah, after maybe a year and a half, whatever, you are going to start the company. You had that conviction already.
We thought we would build this. I don't know if the conviction was start a company. It was like we are going to build this, we are going to we are going to solve this, and at
Wow.
that point the solution was like, oh, it looks like starting the company was one of the things we had to do to solve this problem. In fact, in the initial version we actually built a mock interview platform, so that even in the same hiring process, while you are giving a mock interview, because my interview also didn't go well, so can someone come and train you for say taking a mock interview for Amazon, on Google, and so on. So we started the idea with that, dabbled that for a while, and then when we didn't realize, we built this online test platform and so on. So we've been trying a few things. It's almost like, what can we do to help the students, plus what are the new projects we could build, and to do the projects. Yes, at some point we actually registered the company much later, when one of the customers told us saying, to try your, or potential customers told us saying, to try your product we need your company name, like without that we couldn't try your product. And then
Yeah.
we realized, oh, we have to register, and then that's when these enterprises will try our product. So we actually was mostly solving it more than trying to build the company.
I see. So it was more sales driven rather than proactive.
Yeah, it is talking to people who might use the product, find it useful. More than sales driven, it was I don't know if we had a revenue target. We were like, it was almost like, you folks are doing it this wrong way, like this is not how it should be done. There is a better way, try it out. And we would have been happier if everyone moved on to the online assessments, even without paying us. Like the core is, nobody should go through the pain we went through as
Right.
students. That was the primary thing which motivated us that time.
Okay, so you started coding while you were
Mhm.
students. You took a job to get some hands-on industry experience, and then the
Mhm.
focus was on solving the problem.
Yeah.
You started talking to the prospective customers. How did it evolve from there? So up till a certain point, you are still heavily coding, heavily developing the product.
Mhm.
At what point did you have to start expanding your team?
Yeah, so initial few hires we made were all our, from people from our college, and when we so this was a point in time when Vivek moved to the US to set up the US org, and I was in Bangalore, and what we did was we rented a small 2 BHK, and I was staying there. And then we used to call it the hacker house. So even at that time, like it was a core of the, so, and the folks we were trying to hire, I wasn't married that time, they were all fresh out of college, so we all lived together. Like, this is the place. And even the interview used to be fun. We would call, and this is folks in different colleges, we'd call the students or people who are interviewing with us on a Friday evening,
Mhm.
and they would stay with us for the whole weekend, and they would leave on Monday morning. Like, this was the interview process that time. And we
Oh,
don't
wow.
there is no specific one, like they were talking tech during dinner, talking tech during lunch, and so on. And we would ask, and we would not fly them, but we'd at least we'd make sure we give them the train ticket from VIT or different parts of Chennai and so on to come to Bangalore. and this was also fun for students to come and stay with us and build something with us. So the interview was a 2-day process where you would know everything about the person by the end of the weekend. My landlord was very confused. Like, there was one weekend there is no one in the house, and then the next weekend you have 6 people, new people coming in. It's like, are you? He probably would have assumed we are doing some Airbnb there, but it ended up being our hiring process. But that is certainly a. I mean, we started hiring more developers early on. Like, when I say more, the first 2 to 3 developers, and we stayed with that team for about a year or two. And you would see that the market pull and the speed at which you want to ship features to the customers getting blocked by not having enough developers. Like, it's not the features which your product manager is asking, it's the features which your customers are asking.
Yeah.
And you have to scale fast, and you got to build those enterprise features and so on. So when that pull, when you see and when you sense it, I think that's the right time to hire a few more developers till the pull or the urgency goes down. And again, it has another wave where now there is more and more requests, and then we hire more. So it's certainly early days. It's always a pull from customer, which made us again hire more to the team, engineering team especially.
Amazing hiring process, which is not going to scale by any means if a company of a real size would try it.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are the things you get to try when you are a small startup, and you don't have to think about scale. So perks of being a startup. The benefit of that process, I also see that not just that you learn about the candidate, but also the other way around. The candidate really comes to know what kind of people are they going to work with, what is it that you guys are working on, what is the problem. So all of that is communicated very clearly, which usually is a gap in a 1 hour 75 minutes sort of an interview, where you just end up talking about it for 5, maybe 7 minutes, and what are you going to understand as a candidate?
Yeah, they see it real time. Like, this is how we work and this is how we operate. They know, like, who's making coffee for the team to everything, right? Like, so that's a process I enjoyed the most.
Interesting. And okay, so let's walk further on the journey. So now you are at a stage where you're living in Hacker House, and love that name, by the way. And you're hiring people and hiring people from the college mostly, and that went on for a year or two. When did the next jump come into picture, where you had to start thinking about hiring some leadership, and just hiring engineers was not enough? Like, what was the point when you had to think about inserting a manager between you and the developers, maybe elevating somebody from the development team to lead the group, so to say?
Yeah, in fact, I still remember it was an young group that when I first told them, we have to hire a manager, the people were like, this can't be happening, kind of a thing. Like, how can we hire a manager? We thought it will be a flat hierarchy and whatnot. And then I had to tell them, why this is needed, and explain that process to them to some level. So there is certain, again, the way we went with the managers is some of our, call it seniors, and not really there wasn't a people manager part needed immediately, but there was certainly technical guidance needed. Like, that's where thankfully, given the amount of time we are spending in building the product, and the size of the team, the people issues weren't so much, and then it was always like tech, and how do I build this, and so on and so forth. So we wanted someone who could architect things better. You don't have to do the same thing twice and avoid some of the common pattern mistakes and scale and security and other things as we start building. So first is it needed, I would say, someone at an architect level or someone at a senior level who could design things, and also had a knack of managing people. Like, it's not directly a people manager, still the team was reporting to me, but people would go to that person in case if there is a people issue as well, if there is something they had to talk to someone, and usually I would get the update from them. And as we are building out different products, and there is a natural sort of a structure which forms, and like saying, okay, here is one person who could be the people manager for this particular team, and then the other person who would become the people manager for other team, and so on. So that structure evolved. It eventually, when I made someone the people manager for the team, it was like no surprise at all. It was like, isn't it was the question was like, wasn't this person already a manager? Like, aren't they operating at a manager level already, kind of a thing? It was such a obvious decision because they were running almost everything needed. In fact, the tricky part is the people I wanted to uh, make managers, they were reluctant to become managers because they enjoyed the IC and the tech part so much. And then I had to tell them how manager path you could impact a lot more people, and you can be responsible for the growth of people they're already taking care of, right? So that took a while, and in I think 4 years or 3 years is probably the time where we had the structures all in place, where I had the managers reporting to me, and then the managers had the direct. So it's just still two levels from me, and
Right.
then a few years later, we had to get a VP of engineering to manage the entire managers, and then that structure formed later.
Awesome. When was that? When did you get a VP engineering in
I
Hackerrank?
think the VP engineer would be like maybe 5 years after we started. Like that's when. So we started in 2011. Maybe I think 2015 around that time is when we got the VP engineer to run operations.
Okay. So, and from that, now
Mhm.
let's jump to today,
Mhm.
right? How big is the team today, and how many management layers do you have in Hackerrank?
Got it. So even now, we are a flat organization. So if I think of it, so now the VP of product and VP of engineering both report to the CEO directly. So you can think of it
Okay.
as Vivek manages. The structure is Vivek is managing VP of product and VP of engineering, CEO, and then the manager, or let's call it senior directors, then managers, and then the individual contributors. So from the CEO, it's about 4 or 5 level.
Right.
I have certain engineering teams, like let's say the DevOps and then the quality, and there is a team for labs where we build the next products which we want to ship, and so on. So there is these three, which are connected with the core, but which has its own separate functions reporting to me. So that's the structure. So for even for an individual contributor to me, who's going to be at 2 levels or 3 levels max, is
Right.
still the same. So it's a flat org. We have about 100 to 150 folks in India, and about 100 plus folks in US, and about 40 odd folks in Europe. So that's so still are less than 300 in total. That's our structure we have.
Awesome. So from coding a speculative version of this in college
Mm-hmm.
to then just going to a bunch of companies and just selling, trying to sell it to them, or trying to not even sell, just convince them to use it.
Mm-hmm.
It is about 300 people company today.
Mm-hmm.
And how has your role changed on the way? So we talked about you coding to then you hiring the initial set of engineers to then you hiring the first set of leads to now. How has your
Mm-hmm.
daily routine changed?
There are some things which change and some things which probably hasn't changed much. One is certainly there is an amount of time I just spent purely on coding, and there is I don't have to look at the calendar. The only task I had was code, and show the demo to say Vivek or a couple of other customers, and then
Yeah.
get the feedback and code. That's the early cycle, and then it came. There is a good amount of time spent on, I'd say, code reviews and architecture more than the actual code.
Yeah.
Still, doing a good part of the code, but not really the majority reviewer, but majority of the code. But others are writing majority of the code, and I'm just ensuring the infra is in the right place to support that, and so on.
Right.
To a point where now it is to I'm there in all the architecture reviews, and mostly I'd say commenting on the documents which decides how things are going to be implemented. So it's operating at one more level up, where most of the time is spent in looking at the architecture diagrams, not even the AWS account, but like even before things are built, here are the challenges. This is how we can do this, and can we reuse this particular component from the other place. So right now, a lot more at the architecture place. What hasn't changed probably is the part you take part in hiring. There is always the push to keep the hiring bar high, especially when there is when you're desperate to hire, like we really have to close this position, and it's easy to ask the tough question or say that are you lowering the bar because of desperation, or is this person really a superstar in something else or not? So there is certainly that from at day one to ensuring we get the right talent. Even today that hasn't changed, and the part I take part sometimes I take even some of the very first rounds or even the internship hiring just to ensure that the bar is high. So those are the places where I think I haven't taken a step back and still enjoy doing that process.
Awesome. Yeah, completely makes sense. And to close out this section on your journey, if you look back and look back at a decade plus worth of journey that you've had in Hackerrank, are there some things that you would look back on your routine and your approaches and consider doing them differently if you were to do them today?
I think I maybe the early days, especially the early days, probably were some of the big wins we had. Like for example, we were the first YC company from India. So the first company to be selected from this. We were presenting in TechCrunch. We got funded by Khosla, but there is a these were huge events as I look back, but we didn't celebrate them well. Like I remember, because this was in Vijayanagar way back in 2011, and this is where the Hacker House was there, and there was no good places to go out, celebrate, or anything. So Vivek was presenting about the company in TechRun, and we got a tub of ice cream and kept it in that, and that's what we used to celebrate. And then once Vivek presentation is over, okay, here is the list of tasks to do, go and so on. I think right now we are a lot better. Like we take the team out, and there are fun activities we do. But that time it wasn't. We didn't know that we have to celebrate this. The to-do list always was so much to do that we just kept on doing. But beyond that small thing, I don't think I'd change a lot.
Nice, very nice. Celebrate beyond a tub of ice cream.
Yeah.
Awesome. Sounds good. With that, let's dive into the second section of this podcast, which is the Hackerrank Tech Deep Dive. Let's talk a bunch about and geek out about the technology and the architecture of Hackerrank. To start off and set the context, what's the tech stack? What do you use right now? What cloud, what languages, what databases, what other technologies?
So when I started, and because my programming language used to be PHP, I built the whole thing with PHP, and it was between me and Vivek. Vivek was a Java developer, and I was a PHP developer. And when we started this, like, okay, which one should we go with? And we both knew that we could always learn the other language because it's just a programming language, but which one is going to be most comfortable and the right decision for the company? So I said, okay, I'm going to write more code than you, so let's go with PHP. And then we did this for the first 3-4 years. The core was built only on PHP, and we used a framework called Code Igniter for that. And then when we hired some of these early developers, they saw that they certainly didn't enjoy writing the code in PHP. So we and they decided, okay, same rule applied for them. We are the one who are going to write more code than you would do, so why don't we pick a right framework? And we had we had Python and Ruby as the two strong competitors that time. And certainly the Ruby's ecosystem to build fast and ship fast, the Ruby gems and other things was much better than Python's at that point in time. So ours is predominantly the web application as Ruby on Rails, and then completely hosted in Amazon Web Services. So on the front end, again, we went through the similar journey. Like when we just started, we started before there was React. So it was jQuery to start with, and then there was a small framework called Backbone JS, which had this concept of MVC, which at least gave us some structure. And then when React came in, it felt like it's one of those things, like where it was a very clear decision on migrating things to React. So on the front end journey, it was so jQuery to Backbone to React. And now I think again we were on the PHP side and even on the Ruby side, we're pretty much a monolith for most of the time. But now we are trying to chip it away into microservices too. So on the again on the database, we used RDS, and that has saved us a bunch of times in terms of outages and scale up and scale down, rather than hosting a MySQL server in EC2. We pretty much started with a very simple, none of the containers and Docker at that point. Here is a simple, auto scaling group. When traffic goes high or when the latency is high, we're going to launch few more EC2 servers, and then it comes down, we're going to shut down those EC2 servers. That scaled well for most of the times, unless there is a sudden surge where and thankfully we got the heads up for most of these sudden surges, like we would know. But that was pretty much the architecture. Like right now, there are few microservices. There are some places where we use Golang. There are some places where we use Python. There are some places where we use Node.js. Where, for example, if you're writing code, the real-time auto completions comes from a Node.js server, because that's a lot better for dealing with WebSockets and other stuff. When we are scraping a lot of data, when we are trying to get data from other job descriptions and understanding skills from that, something like a Python makes a lot more sense. And our code running infrastructure, where we have to deal a lot with internals of Docker and internals of Kubernetes. We've written that in Golang. So now it's like the base. What's the best language we want to use this with? If any language applies, let's fall back to Ruby, because there is a lot of Ruby experts within the company. So Ruby is think of it as in the switch case, the default case. But if there are specific ones, then we would just go with the language which makes sense.
Awesome. Interesting. And the infrastructure to run the code and evaluate the results. How is that built? Like, how did you figure out the tools to do that? Because that's not something that you see out in the wild being used every day. It's not some simple API that you can just build. So how was it built in early days, and is that the same architecture that survives even today?
Yeah, initially I think it was like as I was saying, it was one of the things we built in the college projects, and we extended the one we built in college was call it a toy project now, but it is the code. Like it certainly had it was written in C++ and dealt with all the system calls, which sets you had to deal everything I learned writing this system more than what I learned in my operating system class. Like, how do you fork a process, and your parent is now tracking if and child process is where we run the code which is submitted. And before the child process starts executing the code, you would set the memory limit, you would set the CPU limit, you would set the file limit, process limit, and all the possible things. And C++ made it possible. I think the function called a setar limit or something, with which we used to do that. So that's the way. And then once the child exits, the parent would report the status of that, and so on. So and that scaled well for quite a few years. Like it certainly again, in college we just built it as a simple system, and when I built it in Hackerrank, I had to put in on top of SQS, build a queuing system, and ensure that we have different priority queues for that, and so on and so forth. Certainly at a much bigger scale than what we have seen in college, but the core of it is still the same. How do you run a process in an agile, so to speak? Now it's a lot different. So we rewrote all of it in Golang, because we realized we could leverage a lot from Docker, because Docker is doing the same thing which we're trying to do. You run a process under a process, and that's why we had to write this in Golang, because there are some of the Docker internals we were using. So at this point in time, it's completely rewritten, leverages a lot from containers and the concepts of containers. So unlike earlier where you have to spin up a EC2 system, here you can start things within a matter of 2 seconds, and so on. So that's how the code running infrastructure has evolved. It's interestingly, it's pretty, like we thought it is pretty common out there, when we were in college, because we used to participate in the Stop Coder, ACM, and competitive programming was the life during college days. And I thought it could be a common software. And only when I, much later I realized, oh, this is a software for the specific use case. And it's not something, which is available as it is. And it's not something you could just use it readily.
Awesome. So do you use Kubernetes now, or is it just raw Docker containers on a
No,
auto-scaled EC2
now
instance?
we use Kubernetes across our system.
Okay. And what does the infra look like? So Kubernetes, sure. And what's your alerting system? What's your monitoring? Any other such tools that you use on the ops side?
Yeah. So there is certainly some of the tools we have invested over the period of time. So there is New Relic, which handles most of our monitoring and alerts. It's actually one of the tools which we got in the last couple of years. So it's new, so to speak. Basically, because unless you have the right person managing your Neuralink cost, the cost of Neuralink shoots up. Like if you start sending more data to Neuralink, you would pay more to them than what you'd even pay for a cloud provider. So you got to get that strategy right on what are the ways in which you're going to not mess up your Neuralink cost. But once if that is in place, you would have rest of the stuff in like all the alerting things, logs, everything, even the error logs coming from the front end, back end, could all streamline in one place, and that's a blessing. So the only thing with Neuralink is just that you just don't by mistake you can push a lot of logs and blow up the cost there. So that's one. Before that was, we had our own internal ELK setup which could handle just our cloud cost, and it eventually cost your storage, and we had alarms for that, so that if the storage reaches 90, and I think we had a ELK with a Kafka, so that the Kafka process the logs and sends it to that, and it used to handle the queue as well.
Yeah.
That scaled well for a good amount of time, like till last couple of years, for us to handle logs. We've been using, I think, Opsgenie for all the alerting purpose, like your on-call schedule, and everything is connected with Opsgenie, and Opsgenie certainly talks to a whole lot of tools out there. We have for a while before the ELK, and some parts of it have also used, I think, the AWS CloudWatch alerts when we didn't have the Neuralink in place. So it starts with like start small, see whatever is the minimal tool. You don't have to optimize for everything, but after some point you start the operational overhead takes over, and it's better to get this in a centralized tool. So even today now we don't do CloudWatch alerts, but we do everything through Neuralink, because that's the central place where we can manage things. So this is how things have evolved. It took us again, even on that's on the tools side. On the cultural side, um, you know we had for a good amount of time had these noisy alerts, like alerts used to come in, and there wasn't too much rigor on, okay, if the same alert comes 10 times, does it really, does it get the claim as an alert at all, or is it just a notification? And if for the same alert you're just waiting for it to go back to green, do you need that in the first place? So this again, along with like last couple of years, we have spent an enormous rigor that now Opsgenie alert people panic and wake up. Like earlier, it was like, yeah, I know this is an alert, this will come, this will people could predict this is going to go back to normal in 10 minutes, let's just give it the 10 minutes, and things will be fine. So and and it's because you do need to, as you get these tools, it's not just getting a tool and setting it up. Like you got to set it the right way, which on how it works for your organization, so that it fits in well. Like otherwise it's not about finance approval, you just get it and the tool is integrated, and generally one engineer would be very very excited to set all of this up, but then it has to grow into the entire culture, and it has to flow across all the teams. So that took a while to understand. In fact, our channels used to be like, so there was a alert channel, and then we had one channel which is called Hawkeye, which is one level above the alert, and then that became noisy, and then we created a channel called Red Hawkeye, which is then this was like, thankfully we stopped there, like we didn't have to create a red Hawkeye or something. So so the volume of alert also matters. If there are too many alerts which the engineers are not able to focus to, it's better not to have those alerts. And at some point, you can turn most of it off, focus, fix a few, get them done, and given enough time, good engineers always fix it to the core, like it won't come back again. And then you can send, like, ensure, like, increase the circle with which you want to cover all. Trying to go all in, saying I want to monitor everything, that didn't scale well.
Right. Also, alerting is more art than it is science,
Mhm.
where you have to know these nuances. You have to know that there's to be actionable alerts, there's to be right thresholds, cut out the noisy alerts. I have seen so many companies struggle with it. I would like to bring up the sponsor of the episode, which is 10x Blue Jay, who are solving exactly this problem, where it's AI powered automated alerts. Even if your team does not have the expertise to set the right alerts and tune them, their automated logic out of box does it very well. They even give you a score of how well your alerting is set up. So yeah, shout out to them and check them out. Find the link in the description below. Coming back to Hackerrank, Hari, on the infra side, right? How would you monitor what's happening in the front end? Because the front end is also quite dynamic. There are some simple parts like login and displaying a problem and displaying the scores, but then there are some very exciting parts where there is code and there is syntax highlighting, which you could just debug on backend, but then there is breakpoints that people can put, and many things that helps the developer write the code. Do you have something that gives you better monitoring on the front end side? How do you get that visibility?
Yeah, the front end, especially developer experience, is something which is core for us. I remember this interesting thing. So this is so there is this Microsoft project called Language Server Protocol, the LSP, which has now standardized how editors can talk to a language server, and how language server can give things like auto completions, suggestions, recommendations, and so on. So rather than, so for example, a Golang would write one LSP server, and then VS Code or Sublime and Vim and Emacs could use the same LSP protocol and get the auto completions based on the current keyword and so on. So it solved a lot of problems. But before this, we wanted to give the best autocomplete for developers typing Java code. And imagine, and we were asking developers to write Java code in the browser, and the number of functions and so on is so complex.
Yeah, it's tremendous.
So yeah, and nobody, it's hard to remember all of it, right? And that's where the users would struggle. So what we found was there was this weird open source project called, I think it's called Eclim. Okay, so it's a mixture of Eclipse and Vim. So I used to use Vim. I still love that editor. So when I wanted to write Java code, and because Vim didn't have this Java auto completions, there's a plugin called Eclim, which means it will start a headless Eclipse server, and then in from Vim, using some odd protocol, it will send the code to the Eclipse server, and then it will get the auto completions from Eclipse and show it in Vim. It's sort of like a crazy match between one super big editor and one very small editor. So what I did was I tried to figure out how this project works and what protocol it did, and then from the browser we started sending the same to some of our servers which was running Eclipse in headless mode. So unlike like the code servers, we had about, like, say 40-50 servers just running Eclipse. And if you are writing Java code, it would have a WebSocket connection to that, and it would immediately compute. And because this is something which you're running real time, you would have to get that and get it back. So same if you're talking about breakpoint, you need to have enough GDP servers which are running there to take this and execute this. And once the breakpoint is removed, those servers can go away types. So uh, the development experience in browser was a lot complex earlier. Today, at least VS Code makes it on VS Code on the web makes it a lot more simpler and standardized. But this is there are weird places where you'll get your inspiration from. Like I was trying to see how this Vim plugin can talk to Eclipse, and if my Vim can talk to Eclipse, why can't my Chrome talks to a remote Eclipse is how we built the auto completion at that point before LSP servers.
Yeah, and think about doing this not just for Java,
Mhm.
but for an array of languages that
Mhm.
you support in browser, and supporting debugging for them for so many
Mhm.
languages. And each language would have its own idiosyncrasies of how to debug and what are the various components that you have to run to debug. So yeah, kudos to that. I mean, that is just tremendous amount of technical complexity that Hackerrank solved, and
Yeah,
that definitely set the path.
the complexity certainly, in fact, that the complexity on another order of scale comes in when you're hiring developers for different roles. So if you're hiring a software developer, you could give them a code editor. They would write some Java code, Python code, run this. You'd be checking them for basic algorithms, data structures, and other aspects of it. When it became a front end developer, what they expect is write the code in the browser and able to see the real time preview there, like a code sandbox kind of an experience, or a JS fill kind of an experience. If you're hiring a mobile developer, they expected to see the app right there. Like, how would you see it in a if you're building something in Xcode, or
Yeah, in
an
Android
Android
Studio.
studio, right? So
Yeah.
that's something they were expecting then and there. And when we then started assessing developers for data scientists, the expectation is a Jupyter notebook, and like load as a Jupyter notebook, and then we would run the command data analysis and so on and so forth. In fact, today when we have to hire AWS developers, we actually give them an AWS account with like $1 credit, and here are the services you can use. So go ahead and create an S3 bucket, and then see if you can put this S3 bucket behind a CloudFront, and then put this behind in a VPC, and so on and so forth. So there's a bunch of these experiences should be very close to your real job. And so it's beyond the editor. It is
Yeah.
something which is super close to what you would use. I think the only thing I didn't build in this whole when feature people asked was COBOL developers, the mainframe developers, found our web page fancy. They are used to a black terminal just with just a cursor. And I said, okay, I can't do that. Like, I don't want to imitate a mainframe terminal here and just give you those. So basically, they are used to the dark theme, the black side, and
Yeah.
we didn't have a dark theme by that time, and it's like, maybe I'm not going to do that. Like, I don't think we would go to that part at this time. So that's one experience I didn't bring it real close to what the developers are using.
Awesome, awesome. So yeah, we talked a bunch about how the language has evolved, how the infrastructure has evolved. Let's talk about some spicy things.
Mhm.
How was your scale experience? What were some mishaps that you had in terms of architectural decisions, in terms of having some really bad scale experiences? Everybody faces them. Tell us some examples.
Yeah, scale experiences are it almost makes you cry when you're going through it, but much later it becomes really good stories to tell new hires and other developers, because that's probably the one I keep sharing most of the time.
Yeah.
I think the one which I remember today would be is there was a I mean, we used to do programming contests at scale, and this is we were doing this for one of the programming IEEE used to have a annual contest, and we got the specs from them. We realized, oh, there is going to be how many participants, and they gave some 40,000 or something. We did a load test up to 50,000, and the registration is anyway closed. So there won't be any more extra people, and it's a 24-hour contest, right? So
Mhm.
and the way they used to do this is every hour they would add a question. So you can't just solve all 24 questions in the first 1 hour, even if you're real smart, and then walk away. So you got to come back every hour and then solve this, and that adds excitement to the whole contest. And so everything was fine, and the first minute they add a question, the site goes down. And I was like, what happened? So it was a team contest, and every team had 3 people. So and people would log in from different devices. So it is still 40,000 participants, but it is 1,20,000 clients for us sending requests, and we couldn't ask them to stop or anything like that. It's impossible to do that. So thankfully
logins at once, basically logins at once from
Mhm.
those many people, like thundering herd problem.
Yeah, thundering herd, plus the scale was 3x,
Yeah.
because it is 3 browsers.
Yeah.
And so imagine if it's 40x, we had up to 50x buffer, but the 40x went up to 120x, because it is 3 per people per account. And each client was sending requests and so on. Thankfully, the site obviously went down for the first few minutes and then came back because our caches got filled by then. So we had memcache, redis, and they were serving as the first line of defense, and things were fine. The minute they added the second question, site went down again for 3-4 minutes, and we realized when they modify the contest, the caches gets deleted, and the thundering herd problem kicks in, and everyone is trying to access the site at the same time. And then you come back to, like, the caches gets filled in. People also come back after a while, couple of minutes, and then it's fine. It's one of those odd problems where within 2-3 hours I know the site is going to go down after an hour. So it's like so when the second question got added, we could predict the problem. So it's like, okay, the contest started at 12, site went down at 12, site down at 1. At 1:10, we are talking 2 o'clock, the site is going to go down for the same reason.
Yeah.
How do we do this? And so during the contest, we launched a couple of read replicas. And then and we were, by the way, the code didn't have master, slave, and so on. So we are trying to figure out which are the parts of code which might be heavy, which can read from slave. And then within an hour, we try to launch the master read replica. It barely handles. There was few sites. Site didn't go down, but it was slow. Like, the response time was somewhere at, like, think of it as it took 20 seconds average, and 30 seconds and so on. Wow. Then we come back to one more hour, saying, okay, how do we've solved this more. So by the last 4 hours, we were super tired, but there was no outage. Like, it was so within a 24-hour window, every hour we knew this was a thing, and we were making these changes and improving the site real time. It was also very oddly paced. It was not like a one big burst, but the challenges getting added every hour. That was one. And oddly enough, the entire IEEE team and us used to be in the same Skype call. That was what we used that time. And they would constantly ask, like, saying, so how are you fixing it? When are you fixing it? And so on. It was very nerve-wracking, but one of the best stories I can tell now.
Yeah. Can't imagine the 3x the load than you expected, and a 24-hour marathon. So becomes difficult towards the end. Was there any other scale problems that you would like to share?
This was even before the IEEE, when our scale was much lower, and I used to travel with customers to campuses. So I was in IIT Kharagpur, and in Hackerrank, the login to the test is when it's a computationally intensive process compared to other requests. So it takes about, like, say, 200 millisecond compared to the 20 millisecond of other requests. So I was there in a lab full of, like, 100 or 200 odd students, and I gave them the link to the login page, and they all filled in all the details and waiting for my instruction to start the test.
Okay.
And the fix was also super funny. So I told them, start the test, and all of them clicked the start test button exact same second, and the site went down. And it was super embarrassing, because the minute that happened, you have 200 students just looking at me in the middle of the hall, saying, what do I do next, right? Like, so, and you have to come up with a solution. All I asked them to do was refresh and try it again. But this time, people were filling the form, which had about 6 to 7 like, which course you are in, which year, what is your CGPA, and different, which city you're from, and so on. they were filling the form at their own speed. It's a form
Ah,
of about 7 to 8 fields that load balanced the request to me. Like, so from the
yeah,
second batch, I didn't give the link. I gave all the instructions and gave the link. The link loads fine. It's just the submit part which took while. So it always probably there is the thundering herd, or sometimes it's not caching the right things. Obviously, missing MySQL indexes at the start, thinking why will this table even grow, and then it grows crazily long and then keeps taking a lot of time to search. Those were some of the things which are the early stage scale issues. Scale is always it's a fun problem to solve, especially when the trickier thing is, it's easy to throw out everything and then restart again. The trickier or the harder challenge the good developers would do is like, I'm going to retain these and I'm not going to reinvent the world, and
yeah.
still make it handle. Here is the bottleneck which I'm going to remove, but the rest of the parts still can stay same. That's an art, or a science like that. That's probably where you do get a lot of pressure, able to scale the system but without changing a lot. Like, you don't rebuild everything from ground up.
Yeah, it's very investigative. You have to
Hmm.
find and connect the dots and
Yeah.
find the bottleneck and just attack the bottleneck rather than revamping the whole thing. So it takes very deliberate set of hops
Mhm.
to arrive at, okay, this is what I'm going to attack.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's the
so
developers version of Sherlock Holmes, where there is a
yes.
there is the the clues and are there, but are you able to connect all of them?
So let's move on to some less technical but
Hmm.
yet relate to technology part of Hackerrank, which is technical practices. Can you talk about some technical practices that define the culture of Hackerrank today?
I think one of the things is, developers are responsible for things end to end. So if we had from the start always allowed developers to be on the calls with customers or directly reach out to customers, and so we had our field team, but you would keep them in the loop. But and because we are also dealing with recruiters and hiring managers hiring developers, a developer conversation is a lot more easier to take care of, rather than it passing through multiple channels. And we were able to get the bugs solved faster. Some of the times the customers on the other side, who are developers, want to jump in on debugging the problem, saying, could it be this, and so on. And because everyone wants to solve that puzzle.
Yeah.
Maybe I think this could be the reason in my network, maybe that's why it's working there and whatnot. So the devs taking end-to-end ownership is probably one of the core things, and that sort of gave the team the freedom. Like, anyone can write to a customer saying, you may have faced this issue. Do you want to reach out to us, or can I set up a time, and so on and so forth. And then in term there has been always a focus on the velocity.
Mhm.
It's optimized for velocity. Like, can you take the smaller step, launch it first, show to the customers, get the feedback, and then get back, rather
Yeah.
than delaying it much longer. There is always, like, you can reduce scope, but the sooner you can show value, the sooner people can give feedback. And there is a whole lot of things we learned from customers, because we just had about a year experience when we started this. And a lot of times it's customers who guided us through the right process, saying, this is what we are looking for, this is what you're going to solve the problem for us, and so on. So that certainly, something we still ensure that as much as possible we get a chance to talk to customers,
Yeah.
get that like some of the times they do give the solutions, or their ask gives us ideas on what are the new things we can build.
Mhm.
In terms of, again, there is a lot of um, things which the developers can recommend on the product side, because they are the end users as well, saying, this is how the auto completion is going to work. Or do I want the editor in the split view or in the horizontal view? Do I want a terminal at the bottom or not? So the devs get a lot more, give a lot more product input, saying, this is what I would prefer. I do think of it as, I need a dark mode or not, and other parts of it. So that also is one of the core things where the amount of product input we want them to give is a lot high, because
Right.
ultimately they are the users of the product.
Correct. Yeah, velocity is sort of expected because all the startups would try to have more velocity and ship things faster. So I'm not surprised by that. But I'm more curious about the end-to-end ownership bit.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough one to actually have engineers do because we are not trained to do that
Mm-hmm.
in the college, right? We are trained to write code, we are trained to think about systems, but we are not trained to talk to customers and um, like have that end-to-end ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Do you figure this out or try to figure this out through some signal during the hiring process before you hire people in Hackerrank?
It's one of the things, especially when we do check for how people have handled end-to-end ownership of something they have done. It could be like, so if you are um, even when you're hiring for interns, and most of the interns we would have done have probably launched an app or built a small website or done some freelancing stuff, and we specifically ask them, did you do at least customer support to your friends and family? Like, did anyone report a bug? Based
Yeah,
on that, you fix something. Did you show an, because at a large scale, that's what we are doing. Like, people are reporting issues, we fix that, and then you go back and you ensure the problem is solved. You could do that in a college project, and you in a much smaller scale. You could do that in your own self project. Like, if you have built let's say front end developers, they have like some of the front end developers have built some React components and launched it for others to use it. Like, how do you do customer support for this? Like, especially that's an open source free one. How do
yeah,
you handle the bandwidth and so on? So that's something we look for. It's also like, how do you help the people on the other side? That's the core. It's not because you do need that attitude in any place when you want to work, because the customers on the
yeah.
other side it's not just here. So as long as people have that, it works well. In Hackerank's case, um, we had to actually set some processes when our engineers are talking with the recruiters on the other side, saying, this is how the recruiters speak, this is their language, and don't go all geeky on them. But when you're talking to the hiring managers on the other side,
Yeah,
because our developers start explaining the code and this API calls, and like, stop, like this doesn't translate there, right? But the minute you get in a hiring manager and a tech person from the other side,
yeah,
then it generally goes well. So we make sure we connect the right person from the other side. Even by the way, the hiring recruiters for hiring engineers are also they need to answer a lot of technical questions, so they can answer well, but it does when they don't have to understand our systems though. So that's where we
right.
do have to train our team, saying this persona, this is their problem, and this is what they would need help from. So and then there are quite a few times where we there's something where our website didn't load in a customer's environment, went to their office, saw what the network is like, because it was working for us, it was working in other places, saw what their firewall configuration is, speak with their IT team. Sometimes we used to go to, like, when I went to IIT Kharagpur, we still, whenever we get a chance, have our developers go to campuses, because the team which is building the candidate experience, when they see how candidates are not able to go through the flow they imagine, and I
Yeah.
could see our developers standing there saying the button is right there, click. Like, no, if they can't click, then we have to go back and fix that and make the experience better. So that teaches them a lot, just by talking to customers, being in front of users.
Interesting. So you test for communication and
Mhm.
some customer empathy and that mindset of supporting the user.
Yeah.
But of course, you have to train them on contextualizing the communication and how do you work with different personas
Yeah.
productively without wasting their and more importantly your own time. Let's talk about product strategy. Um, how did that evolve? I think we talked about that as well. You added quite a bit about you guys initially thinking about it yourself
Mhm.
versus then your own team adding a lot of product inputs and it coming from the customers.
Mhm.
Any notable other points you want to add into the product strategy section?
I think there were certainly, I mean, more than product strategy, I'd say we were thankful to have a lot more customers who wanted to see us successful. In fact, like the folks from Amazon and a couple of other early customers, they were in a stage where when if let's say something goes wrong with HackerRank, like the site didn't didn't load, or the IIT Kharagpur where the login failed and so on, the people whom we are interfacing with, the recruiters of Amazon at that time, they would certainly defend us a lot within the internal Amazon team. But they would
Nice.
they would give the heat to us, saying, you folks should step up, and it was almost like, oh, we got scolded by them, kind of a thing. But
Yeah.
they would support us internally beyond limits we would not, like, we never knew at that time. And then whenever they moved to another organization, they introduced us there, and with a lot of recommendation. So certainly we were, and that's mainly because there is also a lot more we would listen to them. As like once the recruiter didn't have even the question paper from their internal Amazon team, and we asked her saying, could we create the questions for you, and can you ask your team to vet it? So that might be a lot more easier than asking a team to create it.
Yeah.
And because we had the experience of the level Amazon would need, we created a couple of questions to them, gave them the option to pick and choose. They picked that, and then they told us, like, why don't you do this as, like, we pay for you for this. And now content is actually a big part of our revenue, and customers use us because of the usage and the ease of usage. When it's not just a platform. Like, for example, if you use a Gmail or a calendar, you expect it not to have any events already scheduled or mails in it. Like, if you create a new account, you would
Yeah.
want an empty account there. But in HackerRank, when you create an account, you get with a library of questions in different domains you won't want to hire from. Like, an empty account doesn't work for us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. More like
that
Canva, for
yeah.
example, where you
Yes.
go and you have a few designs to pick
Yes.
from, rather than
Yes.
having a blank canvas and then just thinking
How do you
about it.
start it, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So and that idea came from, because we were willing to solve, it was like we were willing to solve a problem that day. Like, we wanted to make sure the campus goes through, and that started something. So that has been, it's probably, yeah, the only strategy you would have is listen to customers, and be very close to their problems. Like, it's not them telling us. We were in many a times in their offices, more than our own office. So that we could see that they are struggling here, they are struggling there. This
Yeah.
screen, we didn't build it properly. So a lot of those UX workflows and so on, we could see that directly from them.
Yeah, but it's good to see the kind of love that you got from your customers while they would give you the heat, the kind of
Mhm.
support, because you are I mean, that speaks about the level of solution and the impact that the solution had on their quality of life. It must have been such a big problem for them that it resulted in a huge support for you, and that formed a good channel for product feedbacks. Very, very amazing to see that. And that concludes the technical deep dive section of this podcast.
Mhm.
Let's move on to some lighter and more contemporary stuff, which is the last and final section. Let's start with something light. So I asked for questions from audience, and we have one from the very special Prasanna Shankar, who is your college mate and
Mhm.
the co-founder of Rippling.
Mhm.
And Prasanna asks, who of Hari's college friends coded the first version of HackerRank code checker?
Yeah, he knows the answer. He's not a college mate. He was a roommate for, I think, 3 years, from second year to final year. So
Oh,
so he was one of the person with whom we built this code labs, and we were planning to bring in this programming culture within college. And so yes, a good part of the first version with which we launched is something I'd say he wrote, but it was quickly outdated. So I don't think he can claim his code runs HackerRank anymore. But it's a lot of things from that time.
so let's take a COVID favorite.
Mhm.
What do you prefer, work from office or work from home? And how does HackerRank operate today?
We are a fully remote company. I'm an office. We have an office. Do come to office regularly, and we have couple of a few interns, and then few teams, and who are staying nearby would come. Usually what happens is there are certain teams who have decided to come to office on some days. So like, here are the folks who would come on Thursdays and so on. And I generally come every day just so that I can meet maximum folks. The days when I want to get something productive done, like I want 4 or 5 hours on my calendar, I usually don't come to office. There is a cost to for communication if you're fully remote. Like you do need to make sure your culture and all the things which people would miss in the water cooler talks or lunch and so on is covered some way or other. In fact, there is I used to say this, like when we were fully in office, people always have this, oh, Hari is the CTO, he's always busy, so I can't go and reach out to him for something, some doubt or anything. And whenever new hires join in, it would be there for about first few weeks, and then they see me chatting with others about movies and anime and whatnot during lunch, or playing ping pong, and like they get to a point where, okay, I think he's human, I can go and talk to him, and nothing bad will happen. With the remote, I think that stays forever, because the teams are a little bit of different islands, and we had to put in an enormous amount of effort to bring them together, which is we do by ensuring at least once a quarter or once in 2 quarters the entire team comes to Bangalore office, and they spend about a week here, and then they could go back, and then the other time they join as their teams, like they connect well with their teams for about a week and so on. So I think if you have all the context, remote is perfect. Like you have the best focus time from your home to do that. But once you exhaust that context, you get the context back for being in a collaborative environment, which is the office. So I wish something like a hybrid works, where you're in office for a couple of days, you get the context, and then you're focused on that. That might be the I don't know if it's a best of both or worst of both, how to see that. I think that at least works. And for one of the team where everyone happened to be in Bangalore, we did this. It's hybrid, like you would come to office 2 to 3 days a week, but not every month. In a quarter, that is also just 2 months, like, because you don't need to come. So sometimes people would want to travel and work from a different country for a month and so on, and you do want them to give that opportunity, and gives them clarity on how to build and ship things too. So we've had different, it's almost like a flexibility of the team. Whatever works well for the team, let's just go ahead and do that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, your current choice speaks for itself. If Hackerrank is remote first, there you go. You definitely have to solve for approachability. And what we do in like my team, and I have done this in my previous teams in previous companies as well, is regularly play games. Just set aside half an hour, 1 hour, like every Friday, have a casual chit chat conversation, play some games, and people get to open up, have fun, and they see your human side. And then you become a lot more approachable.
What games do you play, or is it the same game every Friday, or is it like someone has to come up with a different game? How does it work?
We experiment. So there are a few favorites. One is Scribble, which is like a Pictionary thing, right? You draw pictures and people have to guess the word. Another one is Code Names, where have you heard of Code Names?
Yeah, I played the physical one. I have the game at home, but the online version I have not played though.
Oh, I didn't even know there is a physical one. So are we talking about the same game though?
So it's called the spy and the two teams.
Oh yeah, the same one. Yeah, so there are a bunch of cards, and there are two teams, and you have to guess the cards through clues that the spy master will give. And so that's another favorite. There used to be Among Us and some variations of Among Us or some first-person shooter games, which guys like a lot, but I haven't seen girls enjoy that at all. There are a few more. I think there was one more where I forget the name, but like there are questions about. There is a very general question about the team, like who is the person who has most fun in your team, and you have to give the answer, and then people have to It's called Psych. Yeah, I'm not doing a good job of describing the team, but there's an app called PSYCH.
Okay,
Psych.
I've heard of that. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, and that one is also quite fun. It opens up the non-serious side of people.
God, that's a good list. That's a good list. I'll try out some of those.
Working across time zones, you mentioned that your co-founder Vivek moved to US in 2011 when the company was still in a very nascent stage. And since then, it's about 12, 13 years that has gone by. How is that experience like? Any tips on how to manage teams and collaborate across time zones? Any suggestions?
Yeah, that's one of the toughest challenge, and I don't know why Bangalore and SF is 12 and a half hours or 13 and a half hours depending on what time zone you're in, and that's probably the worst. Like, it's like any other place would have been a little bit better. 12 is brutal. In fact, I still remember this was just when it was two of us. Even when we got into YC, or if there is any customer, Vivek would finish the day and he would be super excited and would just call me saying, this is we did go to Microsoft and we presented to them, and here is how the call went on. And I'd be at 4 a.m. It's like, can you tell me after 2-3 hours when I can absorb this conversation? I'm still sleeping. So I think certainly gone past that. There is one is maybe some bit of a patience or understanding. Like, for example, I don't know somehow how both of us had this from the start. There are chances when they're more me than him, but I'd miss the call. Like, it's just that I would set up a call with Vivek or some folks from the US, and then you just keep building, and then you never got the time to sleep. And when the call happens is when you feel sleepy and you'd miss it, or you join a little late, or you join all sleepy and whatnot. But there has always been some level of understanding for the people at the other time zone, that they are stretching beyond limits to make things accommodate for each other. Initially, we had this thing of it should be fair for both regions. So for a month, this team would wake up early, and for a month, that team, the team in India would wake up early, and the team US would stay late. That's bad. Like, and especially when we had engineers in India who loved staying late, and we had the sales folks and unless I traveled there, I didn't realize this as well. Like, folks there starting at 7 a.m. Or even some folks a good set of by 8 everyone is in office, like in the US, and that was the norm. And in APAC, I had some engineers who would walk in at 12, and they would do they literally were, without asking, they were doing the night shift. Like, it was not like they were slacking, but their productive time is when during the night. So that trying to be fair to both regions is not optimal. So if one team prefers one and other team prefers the other, you just go with that and roll with that, rather than trying to make your own processes. So now it's mostly APAC which would stay late, and usually APAC also starts later, like the day starts a little later, and US the day would start much earlier, and a lot of the overlapping meetings happens from, like, so it would start about like now to another 3 hours. It's a little bit more on the leadership side, but for ICs it's not so much. And there is also tools like leveraging the tools like your Zoom recordings and then the AI summary of that and so on certainly helps a lot, where you can get the context but you don't have to spend the whole hour. Those things have certainly helped a lot.
Yeah. By the way, now is about 7 p.m. IST. So you're talking about 7 to 10 p.m. sort of a window where these calls would happen. And yeah, AI recordings have been such a lifesaver. This was, of course, not the case like 2 years ago. And since GPT has come around, it's a lot better, where you can start with just a generated summary of the whole conversation, and then take a call if you want to dig deeper and watch the whole conversation.
Yeah, certainly has a lifesaver when it comes to just getting the context of it, right? And because sometimes, mostly, you want to be up to date with what's happening, and you're able to share that with your teams and other teams cross functional. So for that certainly helps a lot.
Okay, What do you think about conferences? Conferences were a big deal when we were growing up in like late 2000s, early 2010s in our early professional career. And since then, the internet has rendered a lot of that moot because you can share a lot on social media and there is naturally a lot of sharing that's happening. Um, do you see, or what? I know that conferences are valuable even today, but what value do you see in today's time when there is just so much data anyways available to consume from?
Yeah, so there are some conferences and some where which are very specific to few. For example, think about like the technologies like AWS doing their launch events and React conferences, security conferences, and so on. There is certainly these are things where the content in the internet versus what you're gonna hear might be new, and what's coming up. What can you look forward for? What are the new threats out there? And how can you do further cost optimization by something which is new going to come up, and so on. So and there is also becomes a way for you to understand the new technology, like you the discussions you have there paves way for you to learn further. So that and for sure that's probably the social aspect of it, as which is hard to replace by the online stuff. I don't know,
Yeah.
like a lot of companies probably got their co-founders and employees by being in these conferences, which is hard to do. My In fact, what I tell a lot of my engineers is, see you know if you look at a conference, see if you can speak there. And suddenly that changes the perspective of when they look at the conference. And a lot of them who can actually go and speak don't really know that they can speak. Like then they look at like the whole process of applying for an RFP and other things are there. So
Yeah.
many a times I've helped them with that, saying this is probably how you can become a good speaker, and they have changed uh, and started participating in more and more places. So it's not just, there's one part of it is attending, which is just a small part of it. I think the connections you make, and the if you are able to speak and your brand and marketing yourself and getting that confidence to go and speak with so many folks out there, those are skills you'd have to pick up. So I think for me it's like pick a number, like one or two conferences a quarter. Like it's not like I'm going to attend everything, but I do want to make sure um, and this is only way I get a little social. I do meet people, step out. Otherwise, it just goes into coding, and your circle of problems. You do want to come out of that and talk with others as well. So I
Yeah.
think at a moderate number, it's a good thing for people. And when you do it at a moderate number, you have to pick and choose the conferences. So you're not attending all to collect T-shirts or laptop stickers. As long as that's the core, I think it's good, great.
Okay. So you're saying it impacts the learning a lot more
Yeah.
because you get to network and learn from various folks and you hear a lot of new things at conferences.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Thinking about learning, right, Hari? Um, most companies invest significantly in training their workforce and training their employees and upskilling them. What are some areas where you think they should deserve some attention and the upskilling should happen but isn't happening today? Like maybe they are the mistakes that you see developers make on a day-to-day basis and you've been seeing that for quarters or years together, um, and that can change like industry as a whole.
I think probably first at a meta level is treating developers just as people who generate code and confining them to that box versus uh, versus the best I would say is ensuring developers understand the whole context. Like you don't have to it's not like, so for example, the people dealing with customers have some context, and that gets transferred to the product managers, and that gets transferred to the engineers.
Yeah.
The more we can share with the engineers, the better and the long term solutions people are able to build, because they see the patterns and they see if a customer is asking for this, the next thing the customer is going to ask is this, and why don't I just go ahead and not build it but at least put a placeholder for this. So
Right.
there is, so as I am thinking about the different departments in an organization, take customer success, sales, marketing, finance, and HR and product and engineering. I think the biggest way, and engineers are generally curious about every other stuff which is happening in the organization. So if you don't have really solid boxes, but have dotted boxes, so to speak, so that the engineers can understand what is going on in the other organization, like if they can see what it is for a life of the CMO or life of a marketing analyst, and they can understand what it is for life of a support engineer. Here are the percentage, like you can ask the engineers to handle support with a help of the support engineer with the team, so that they can solve these at core. So how do you like, at a meta level, if you're able to break those boxes and have them understand each and every persona within the organization, it helps in the long run, where you're able to empathize with, oh, this is the problem marketing is going through, and I'm going to solve this SEO problem immediately rather than pushing it much later. Or this is a repeated customer support issue, and I'm going to go ahead and solve this so that this doesn't come back again and again. Or here is the same request which is coming multiple times, let me just build an internal Slack bot. So that doesn't have to come through. As if you have a standardized channel, great, but the standardized channel should be there for prioritization, but not for the knowledge hoarding. Like the knowledge of all the problems or all the possibilities we could build can be in a common wiki, or it's shared in in a company wide call, saying here are the challenges which people can pick up, or here are where different ways in which we can get operationally excellent. If we do these few things, we could be much faster, and so on. That getting shared across all makes the engineers think about different possible solutions. Now, some of them might be right, some of them may be wrong. So the recommendation is not to let them build it on their own. Like, that's where they do need the product guidance, the customer's guidance, and the sales team guidance, and so on. But
Yeah.
having that processed and giving it as, here is what you need to build, versus this is the problem, tell me the different solutions and let's go back and see what is the best we could do. That inversion is probably the core step for upskilling the entire tech team.
Okay. Yeah, a couple of things popped out to me. I wonder why this is not happening today, but a lot of what you described is actually having effective all hands.
Mm-hmm.
It's just explaining where we are, what are various departments trying to do, and how does it come together.
Mm-hmm.
Just sitting everybody down and telling them that, hey, this is what is happening, and here are the problems that we are facing, and follow that up with hackathons, right? Innovation weeks,
Yeah.
and so on. And maybe some good ideas will come out, but people get it, allows the creative juices to flow in. But it also, has a very, I mean, this is within the company. Like, who can you have all hands with, right? With your employees.
Yeah.
Because they have some context, right? They know, for example, for Hackerrank, they know that we are selling to these and these companies versus we are not selling to these companies. So they have a much better view of the focus of the customer group that you're targeting. How can we generalize this? For example, how can you build this into a learning activity that is applicable across companies, or even probably across colleges, where as students people can learn from this? And I wonder if we can draw a parallel from what management institutions do. They are very heavy on case studies.
Yeah.
Right? Why do you think we don't do case studies? Is it because we overemphasize on just writing code and building systems and not appreciate software is eventually a tiny cog in a much wider ecosystem, right? Eventually you're trying to create a value. And okay, so then the question converges to, why are we not doing case studies, right? Why do I not see 50 YouTube channels doing various case studies from technical perspective? There's a lot that happens from the product and business perspectives.
That's a good question. I think within the company and maybe within college, there are probably two different modes. College probably is a lot more easier. I think people should do a lot more open source contribution or start something on their own. Like, these are the two best ways you could learn when you're in college, because this teaches you real world programming and building for people. So like I said, if you build an Android application, launch it, make your family and friends use it, and if they stop using it, understand why they're not using it. You may not know the word, it's called churn. And then if you have only 3 people using it, it's your monthly active users. Like, so there is a mini version or a fun version, college version of all the business terms we use, and you could learn the real world through that. And if on the technical side, it's where the open source is where I learned all the good programming practices. How do you launch, how to code, maintainability, documentation, test cases, architecture, all of that comes from learning from open source. So open source and launching something probably is the best way to learn this in college. And when you come to the company side, then it changes a little bit, in the sense where you need to it's thing is, the all hands is probably going to be like an hour, and it's hard for us to go in depth in all the problems. Like you certainly, like if there is a team which is dealing with, say, login and authentication, and the other team is dealing with storing credit cards, and other team is doing something else. Different teams has different problems at different level. So it hackathons and the big innovation weeks, those things certainly bring that creative juice out. Like that's a good part where people can say, figure out a problem in this organization which you can optimize. Here is 48 hours, let's build something. And the idea is, whatever you build should can it solve a real business problem. That gives the openness to it. What blocks is probably the time, or the usual sprint, your the promised deadlines, and a whole set of things, which is the actual work which we have to do. And then when it's almost like when you're running at that pace, it's you do want to sometime take a rest, check whether you're in the right direction, and go back. That's probably what gives you the operational excellence. It does have to come from the top, like saying, we do need to prioritize this, and if it comes at the cost of us pausing a bit, that's not bad. And someone who has done that, someone who has seen the success of it, to see, because some pauses may not work out, and a few of them continuously don't work out, the organization might lose the confidence in the pause itself, saying, oh, this whole hackathon, we've done this 4 or 5 times, had all the energy, but what came out of it types. So you do need someone who have seen that success, how to take that hackathon project to something which is solving an internal problem, making us more productive, and so on. So that's the way it changes in college versus within an organization to do this.
Very interesting. Yeah, the keyword that popped out to me is that it comes from the top. And it absolutely comes from the top. Yeah, in startups you have that speed pressure where maybe there is no time to try and be creative, and sort of waste that time. But in larger companies it's definitely possible. But yeah, it gets as complex as you said, and it needs someone experienced who knows what they are looking for, and like snipe out those opportunities and then take them to success. That plays a big role. Okay, I think I'm just still trying to process why we don't do this at scale. And probably takeaway for me is that there can be more case study sort of explanations of some success stories that we already have in our ecosystem, and put them out there, not from the business or product perspective, but from the tech perspective, as to like start with tech and put that in larger context, and help engineers think why and how this tech was relevant for the customers, and what were some of the choices made which made sense for the customer, and not just for the sake of building a beautiful system, right? Those case studies maybe like I can start with myself and put something out on this podcast. Okay, last question, and with that we'll close the segment and the podcast. What would you like to see here on this podcast? One we talked about, which is the case studies, but what else? What kind of conversations and material would you like to see here?
Quite a few things. I think if I have to say, what would others benefit? People like me who have gone through this is I had 1 year experience, probably a junior software developer at IBM and Amazon, and suddenly our title shifted to CEO and CTO, and we had to learn a lot of things on the go. So something which is on similar stories, similar learnings, and especially when people skip that individual, like here in between stages, like here are some of the challenges you will for sure see, and there is no
Yeah.
way you would escape this kind of a thing. And in general, when it even any across different levels of um, uh, uh, engineering, there is always how do I grow to the next level? Like, what is it that which is expected out of me, and how can I perform better? It's not just about promotion. It's not about like pay raise. It is purely about people are focused on their growth, and
Yeah.
it's almost like if you are here are the X things you need to do, and some level of guidance there. Personally, though, I would love to see if there is a pair programming or a debugging session where someone picks up a big or a tougher challenge, like say Linux kernel, or pick up a React project and say this is the problem with React. Open up a GitHub pull request and say and start coding this and walking us through that. That would be fun to watch and understand how these systems are built. Like if someone could do that for a MySQL database from Oracle team or PostgreSQL, like we've used these tools, but it almost would feel like seeing the matrix when we could actually see how these are fixed internally. Like at some point someone has to write code for these databases too. Like
Yeah.
we are just using it at a query level and using it, but the tools we use, if someone could fix the bugs in that in a real time stuff, that'll be fantastic to watch. It'll be more fun than an IPL match. If
Oh,
if the
wow.
if it gets fixed at the end, otherwise it will be like losing the match. So that would be fun.
Why do you think that is not happening? Is it because there is very heavy context? Like imagine diving into MySQL code base, for example,
Mm, mm,
and figuring out how to do in-memory caching, right? And
mm,
moving the disk caches to in-memory and assuming that you can throw a lot of RAM at it. You
mm,
have to know so much of like underlying MySQL architecture.
mm.
So there is some initial learning curve before you can actually do this effectively and consume the session effectively as an audience.
Yeah, maybe. And I don't know. I don't know. For example, I don't know if it's the site called Twitch. So it's a
Yeah,
site for gamers to play games, and others would just watch. And
yeah,
few years ago, it's like what we would ask: why would someone just watch playing someone else playing games? Like either you would want to play the video game, or you do something else productive, but you're just watching a person play a game. Um, at some level, the whole programming is a game of its own. There is
Mhm.
some context to it, but probably even games have those intrinsic moves or things you need to learn. It's maybe people also, the the people who are writing the code are in the zone, or they feel like, okay, who's gonna watch this kind of a thing. But there is enough people can learn by just looking at how another developer is debugging things. I have a lot of employees in my company who stock my calendar just to see how I operate, like what days do I do what. Like here is your meeting day, here is your work day. You have how come you and people would come and ask, how come you don't have any meetings today? It's like, do you have to do a focus work and so on. So and they have see a day of full of interviews and other things scheduled. So and
Yeah,
and it's purely to understand how does a CTO operate, and how does the calendar look like, and how do you manage all the events from all the teams. I would love to see how someone keeps context of all the MySQL or PostgreSQL files in their mind and know which file to open for what context. So it's it's probably not started because maybe the devs who are working on that don't are they don't want to be disturbed by these external factors and just want to focus and program. It becomes one more distraction, and it's also your screen is getting recorded, and you make a bunch of mistakes before. There's one link in internet where it's in the URL Stipe, where it shows how Paul Graham is writing article for Hacker News. And boy, the number of times he keeps deleting it and rewriting the same sentence and on and is a lot. That Paul Graham is brave enough to publish that. Others are gonna feel a little nervous about sharing. Oh, I don't want everyone to see these are the so many mistakes I make before I arrive at a solution. That's gonna make the developers a little panicky. Maybe that's the other reason too.
These are like a few terrific analogies. First is like, yeah, playing games and coding, right? You have to learn moves to play a game and know something intrinsic about the reward structures, etc. And the same thing applies to code. Yeah, completely agree with you. And why can't we make that leap if gamers are streaming on Twitch? Why can't coders stream on Twitch? And yeah. Oh, yeah. Looking at your calendar, that people stalk. You literally use the word stalk. Your calendar to see how a CTO operates, and it's worth just putting your process out there. That same might apply to me editing the podcast, or someone writing a blog post, or a developer coding and then deleting the code like 50 times, maybe putting super inefficient version of the code, maybe just putting comments and then expanding them out. Whatever, it shows you the thought process. And it shows you how human, like how non-magical the whole journey is. It just doesn't come out automatically.
I think and we all learned by that. Like probably we had our own mentors at the right time, and then people who we were lucky to meet at different times, who tell us these, and then not all of this had to be learned by making mistakes. So it's that's how we all learn. But as if we can put some right structures, like so, I keep the calendar open, and then that makes people see and understand from there as much as possible. It's easy to tell. This is where the early days mistakes also helps, when you can go back and tell, like saying this is what we did at that point in time and so on. That also gives them an idea on how we were. That's how we learned, and that's how probably others will learn from us.
Awesome. I had a blast having this conversation with you, Hari, and that of course brings us to the end of the podcast. Do you have any closing notes before we wrap up the episode?
No, I enjoyed this too. I probably have, like, I mean, this has been my goal for all these years, and what kept me moving in Hackerrank, which is always keep learning and always have fun. Both elements are equally important, like as much as want to build value and everything else. This too has been the guiding principle for all these years. So hopefully people who are listening to this learn something and had fun too.
Awesome. Thank you very much for taking out the time today, and can't wait to have you back after a couple of months.
Thanks, Pavan. Thanks for having me here today.